Very good.
Skiing today?
All right. Welcome, everybody. I want to call the regular meeting of the Kirkwood Meadows Public Utility District to order. And we'll start with the roll call.
Sure. Epstein,
Present.
Schroeder,
Here.
Duker,
Present and
Charonda,
Here.
and Norbert here.
Okay, good. So for announcements, we have a new announcer. So Rick, can you?
Yeah, I'd
Yeah,
like to welcome everyone to the regularly scheduled board meeting today and ask if you are attending this meeting via Zoom and would like to speak, please use the raise your hand function. And I know that Supervisor Woodrow is here as well, and so thanks for attending. And so back to you, Bob.
Thank you. Are there any corrections to the agenda or the consent calendar by the board? Yeah, yes, no? No, okay. All right, then next we have comments from the audience, an opportunity to discuss with the board. No discussion or action can be taken on matters that are not in the agenda. So,
I have a Kirkwood Mountain Resort update.
okay, Rick, I just want to make sure, can people hear him where he's sitting or?
Doug, can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, great. Okay, good. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Yeah, I think glad to be here in person. I think the first one I attended was by Zoom, so it's good to see you all in 3D. I just want to call out, I think we weathered the isolation event, first one of the season. I know it's different than last year, but first one of the season, multi-day road closure event well. I know Bob, Eric Christensen, and I connected before the storm, was checking on equipment and utilities, and feel that we were good there. And then we partnered up afterwards to just kind of debrief how that went. I do know we have one of our vehicle mechanics who's also a volunteer firefighter, Joel Gomez, come over and service some snow removal equipment. So just I love that partnership.
We were very grateful that he was available. Yeah, it helped us out.
Yeah, good win-win. That's what.
Could you just elaborate 1 second? What happened?
I can give you a brief. This was during Saturday, during the storm cycle. Our two large blowers were acting up. One was having a fuel issue, and so Joel gave us some great advice on that. The other one was a clutch issue, and so he was giving advice on how to adjust the clutch, which you're supposed to do every 25 hours. And so between him, Spencer Patterson, our operator Spencer Patterson, and the department head, Joe Pellerin, able to resolve the issues, get those blowers back out. But just a good working relationship with Kirkwood Mountain Resort and their shop, and we share filters and all sorts of things all the time. So it's just really, we're thankful for the help.
Is our equipment of some level of compatibility for sharing filters, for example?
Some of it is, yeah, actually.
Okay, it's not an agenda topic, so we,
Yeah, so
okay.
Yeah, just wanted
Yeah.
to call that out. I know 3 of the nights that we were here, all 3 of our blowers went down in some way, shape, or form, and we kind of got through with one blower. But yeah, good teamwork in the community.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we've got Easy Street, which is a new formula cold patch that we ordered weeks ago. Finally made its way here, and we are actively filling potholes on Kirkwood Meadows Drive, which I know we all appreciate.
Make a lot of people happy.
Yeah. We're prepared for a busy weekend. We're planning for park out scenarios, both days. We've got pretty much all of our available parking. And we're also looking at possible wind holds. We're kind of on the verge for the wind forecast for both days, potential limited operations, and then snow on Sunday. You may have heard that we announced a parking reservation plan going into next season. Emulating what's been successful at Heavenly and North Star. So it's a mix of carpool incentive primarily. We have our existing paid in the VIP lots and then free reservations elsewhere is the plan. But the whole goal of this is to deal with the congestion and gridlock on 88, set the expectation of how many parking spaces are available and not create any kind of false hope that if you drive out, you're going to get a spot and there's not one available. So more details to come. We're in the thick of writing the plan right now. We'll do open town halls throughout the summer and then going into next season, indicate that further. And then, with Chief Ansel, the Barton Clinic and the county medical directors, we had a good meeting a couple weeks ago. get us on the same page for EMS response in the valley, primarily between the Kirkwood Ski Patrol on Mountain, and then that interface with the Barton Clinic, and then with Chief Ansel and his volunteer firefighters. And then finally, this Wednesday, a few of us were at KMPUD and KMR meeting, moving toward fuel switching and electrification and opportunities there with some of the propane. So a good collaboration at this point, and keep it fun. Thanks for letting me provide an update.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very
Thanks
much.
for coming.
Yes.
Yeah, are there any other people wishing to address the board on Zoom or in person?
Let me check our participants real quick. Make sure it's hands up. I see no hands up, so.
There's a hand in the back.
Ray Hansen,
Uh-huh,
all right.
yeah,
I don't know what point, I'm sorry, I'm late, ski lift slow.
I see.
So, I just wanted to address a few things if I have the ability to do at some point with the fire department, whenever it's my turn.
is it related to the topic on the agenda, the fire services plan?
Well, it's in the comment sections and, it's regarding, basically the types of calls, fire alarm
Yeah.
systems.
Okay, the best time to do that would be when we actually have the subject up in the agenda. It'd be great if you could speak then. Does
Perfect,
that work?
thank you.
Okay, good. Is there any others on Zoom?
No, no,
Nope.
no.
Okay. Then we next go, and there are no written comments that I saw in the thing. All right, so is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar, which is the minutes, consent for claims, receivables, and reauthorizing AB 361?
Yeah, motion to approve.
Okay. Is there a second?
Norberg, second.
Okay, so roll call, please.
Epstein.
Aye.
Schroeder. Aye. Duker.
Aye.
Edith Aranda.
Aye.
Norberg, aye.
Okay, great. So we are ready for item 9A, finances.
Let me just get caught up here. As you know, we were absent the general manager and the administration manager, Tommy Baggett, but in the board's packet is the finances from January, which I believe were reviewed by the finance committee, and I have no other comments about the finances unless the board has questions.
John, do you want to?
Uh,
Summarize?
nothing to add, really.
Were there any? Were there any questions?
I do have a few questions, just, I don't know whom to direct them to if Tommy's not here, but maybe to you, John, or you, Rick, whatever.
Well, we're recording this meeting, of course. I will take notes, and so you're welcome to ask the questions. and
Yeah,
I'll try to get the answers.
Again, I continue to caveat everything with, I'm new here, so forgive me. Just looking at balance sheet, I'm sure there are just good examples, but a couple things.
What page are you on? please?
This would be,
23.
it says 23.
Okay. Thanks.
There's just some large variances. We're 6 months into the fiscal year, halfway through. And for example, there's some large variances that stand out. Capital reserve under current assets, for example, is $1 million off. We had $500,000 budgeted. We're at 1.5. Curious about that. There are a few others I'd love to ask about if there's just brief explanations.
Yeah, I think we need to get Tommy for that.
Yeah,
What you-
some of this might be timing, and that's why you're seeing big variances. We've discussed this in previous board meetings, but if you have detailed information, again, you could email myself. I'll try to
Sure.
get the answers and get those back to you.
We also put a substantial amount of money in 5-star. And so it ended up in a different account than what was budgeted for. And I think the $1 million variation, that's what causes it.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously working capital and other short-term operating items would ebb and flow, but capital reserve seems like a strange thing to be off by.
I think that's the case
Yeah,
where
that
it
sounds
is, it's in a
Sounds like an
different,
easy one. Yep.
it's in a different account than what was budgeted.
And we get higher interest in 5-star than we do even out of Leaf.
Okay. Why don't I leave it at that then for now? I can take up this offline if there are more curiosities.
Okay,
Very good.
are there any other questions on the finances? Not hearing none. We'll move on to the draft budget assumptions for the next fiscal year.
So in the board's packet is the latest version, the budget key assumptions or the draft budget
39.
assumption. And this is on page 39 of the board packet. Really no big changes from the last time you saw this, but we're welcome for suggestions and ideas from the board. And we'll continue to bring this back until we get to the final draft of the budget, of course.
Just because some of the redlining at the very top includes 2025 to 29. Is this part of a 5-year plan?
It is.
I see, but this document focuses only on the next fiscal year.
This actually focuses on the next 5 years.
Oh, does it?
You'll see a capital plan that's on an Excel spreadsheet per se that
Yeah.
will show you what our intent is for next year as well as what we're planning for in the future for
Thank
larger
you.
expenses.
Okay, are there any questions, any comments from finance? Who's reviewed this?
We reviewed it, support the criteria and the changes. Not really any bigger changes, you know, some of it is just the usage rate for, the hedging the power purchases and some changes to allocations. So I think it looks good.
Okay, and there's a major loan that's been paid off.
$5 million one.
Okay.
Yeah. Just for context, I'm assuming that this is like the first look that we're having and that it's part of a multi-month budget process. Could you just describe what happens in the next month or 3 as we get to a final? We keep talking about this every month, or the finance committee does it? How does it work?
Yeah, so this is work through the finance committee, of course. What we'll do is we'll start the initial preliminary review of course, last year's finances, apply that toward this year for changes in CPI, whether we're paying off loans, and then operationally, we'll look at the capital. We'll ask each department head to give us a list of capital that they might need. For example, in snow removal, it might be a replacement blower. And then combine all this information, work through finance committee to present it back to the board for final approval, which typically happens in the May or June board meeting. We try to shoot for May.
May to finalize the budget. Are there any big items, big themes, big changes that we'll be hearing a lot about in the next couple of months this year, different than last year? Any surprises, like big new vehicle or such a?
No, I don't anticipate or predict any big changes. The only wild card here is that we are doing wastewater plant improvements. And so if there's a last minute change order that we'll obviously work that through that loan, but we may decide to pay for things in-house versus putting it back on the loan.
I see,
But
thank you.
honestly, I have no anticipated changes,
Or big CapEx items.
not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Okay, any questions, online? All right, let's move on to item 9C, solid waste interfund loan.
Okay, I'll be covering this for Eric. As you know, the board approved an interfund loan for from electric to solid waste back in September 2020. And the loans essentially were $20,000 and $42,000. The interest rates and you'll see in the board packet is the interest rates that were required to pay on these loans to be compliant with I think it's the Brown Act, but it could be wrong. Borrowed fund special district requirements for basically if you borrow money, you've got to pay interest on it. Long story short, basically we have over approximately $100,000 revenue in the solid waste fund. So there's no anticipated large capital expenditures expected over the next 5 years. So essentially staff and finance committee recommend that solid waste repay the full balance of the loan which was calculated through March 31st of 2024. And this calculated cost is essentially 42,000. And so that's staff and the committee's recommendations to pay back the loan.
Yep.
It's $41,469 essentially.
When I read the statement, no anticipated large CapEx for solid waste next 5 years.
We're not buying a garbage truck.
So solid waste is obviously that's different from wastewater.
Yes.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, forget it.
It's the dumpsters.
Yeah, forget it.
And Rick, you clarify for me, the revenue account, is that a operating account or a reserve account, or is it a combination of them? Like, how do I understand the?
It's operations. We're ahead of schedule. If you looked in the finance committee packet, we're ahead of budget for revenue for solid waste. And so our anticipation is that we'll have money in reserve to again, pay off this loan.
While we're on the topic, could I slip in a quick question? I recall hearing that we're gonna make upgrades to the dumpsters, make them easier to lift and more user friendly. Is that, could you update on that, please?
So this is an ongoing project that we have with ACES, the vendor who provides the service for Kirkwood and for us, of course. Every year during the summer, we'll send back a certain amount of containers to be rehabbed, overhauled. As you know, the counterweight balance gets kind of out of whack in the winter sometimes, or it gets stronger. The paint comes off. And so we send them down, they make the repairs. We essentially pay costs for those repairs. They're very good to us about making good repairs and not really charging us over the moon or asking us to replace containers. And so we'll continue that pattern for this year as well. Last year we repainted, I think it was 7 dumpsters by the end of the season. And right now I know we have 4 plus one that the lid flew off during the last storm at the powerhouse, which is hiding up there. But
I had the impression there was gonna be a new, some upgrade to them, so they were just easier, smoother to work. Is that true, or did I misunderstand?
it's all balance, counterweight balance. So
Yeah.
assuming you have no snow or ice on top of the
Yeah.
lid, you should be able in one hand lift that lid up. But every time that truck picks that bin up and tilts it back, it creates wear and stress on the hinges of that lid.
Yeah,
So it's just something that has to be maintained.
maybe I need to go to the gym more. Okay, thank you.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the solid waste interfund loan payback?
Motion to approve, Tucker.
Okay, second.
Norm will second that.
All right.
Elston,
Aye.
Schroeder, aye. Tucker,
Aye.
Minich-Ronda,
Aye.
Norberg, aye. It's unanimous.
Okay, so next item is performance reporting. Welcome, Brandy.
Indeed.
Good afternoon. All right, performance reporting. So if we take a look in our packets, pretty typical months for February. We start with electric. You can see that we produced, or in this case, purchased from the grid, a little over 1 million kilowatt hours. Of that, we had 9% unidentified losses, which brings us to 9% for the year. On propane, we had a little bit of an upside down month, but fairly close. 3.24 million cubic feet were delivered into our tanks. 3.27 were metered. And as we've talked about, we can attribute that to pressure and temperature differences between the loading and here up at Kirkwood. We're at -1% for the month of February in losses unmetered, 2% total for the year.
Could I ask you, at 13 million cubic feet cumulative for the year so far? I'm sure this is somewhere else in the document, but is that on track, greater, less than? How does that match our plan?
If you take a look at the blue line item there, the budgeted meter.
Yeah.
So we're a little under what we expected to
But
be,
almost right on it,
but we're right. We're
Yeah.
right about where we thought
Okay.
we would be.
of course.
All right. Taking a look over at,
I'm sorry to stop again, but up above, same thing with electrical. There, would you consider the variance significant, surprising?
no.
5.6
that's-
versus 4.7?
Well, we budget our metered. So when we're looking at metered, we're 4.8 versus 4.7, which is right about
Uh-huh.
where we're at.
Yeah, okay.
To get the number exactly right, you need to know exactly how many skiers and exact temperatures.
How much snow we're gonna make
Right.
and
So-
there's a lot of variables,
The
but I
main
feel like
goal is
those two
that
are good.
there's enough activity to cover the fixed costs. And at 3.6 million kilowatt hours, our fixed costs are covered. So we're in the money.
At 3 point, could you say that again, Bob, please?
At 3.6 million kilowatt hours, we've covered our fixed costs.
I see about 1 million a year, a month, and 5.6 cumulative. So your 3.6 is annual?
That's budget, yeah, annual budget, annual metered.
Okay, so the 4.8 exceeds the 3.6, and that
So
puts us over.
that means, yeah, everything else is the incremental cost of power.
Thank you.
All right,
Water.
moving on to water. For the month of February, we produced out of our wells 1.67 million gallons. Of that, a 2% was unidentified system losses. Takes us to 12% for the year. We typically shoot for 15%, so 12% is a good number for us. There you will see that we are a little higher than budget for our actual metered year to date. And then lastly, wastewater, a good month there also. So the influent meter at the plant is how much wastewater is coming into the wastewater plant. We've got 1.67 million gallons coming in. Of that, only 2% was unidentified unmetered usage. So unlike the other utilities that we actually have losses, this is extra water getting into the sewer system. So 2% for the month of February is just fine. 24% year to date is about average. We see higher totals at times during snow melt season.
50% in July and August, yeah.
We do. We at times have had even higher numbers than that. So depending on the year and if we had any major damage to manholes or lines, we can see high numbers there.
Is it extremely costly? I know Eric himself spent a lot of effort on this in years past. Is it extremely costly to have 50% or 80% coming in to be treated?
Yes.
There'd be significant savings if you could bring that down?
Absolutely. So we have additional cost in electricity and pumping, which is our monetary cost. We also have the consideration of if we get overwhelmed in the plant, we can't treat it fast enough to get it out the door and into the leach fields. So definitely we want to continue to try to bring that number down.
Last question on this. Is there any sort of plan or project, something that we've been doing ongoing to address 50% during heavy snow melt?
There is. So we have an ongoing manhole rehabilitation project, which is taking some of the worst manholes in the valley where the concrete gets crumbly, the lids get offset, and rehabbing those and lining them, bringing them back up to standard. But we also take a look at different areas in the valley where we know we have root intrusion or offsets and joints and trying to repair those. And we actually have a section down on Wintergreen that we're looking at for this year.
Thank you.
All right, so we have our normal charts in here that show our aquifer levels, our electric use, our propane use, and I put a star on water use so you can
I'm
see,
sorry.
and I think it's the next one actually.
Good wells.
The water leak that we had, that was actual usage, and then we credited here.
What page is this? Water usage?
56.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just a little note that it's water. This was the water leak
Okay, I
that
remember this.
was found
Thank
out.
you for updating this.
Does that work for you, Doug?
Doug's
does.
asterisks.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So that is all I have on performance reporting, unless there are any questions.
Questions for Brandy? Are there any questions online?
Steve.
How many people are online aside from PUD?
We have 7 attendees, Carol, Chris Kearney,
Oh, yeah.
Jack Longinati, John Ryder, Lucas, Sandy Goldberg, and of course Supervisor Woodrow at this time.
Hello out there.
Okay, thanks, Brandy. Move on to the next topic, the water master plan contract.
So, and yes, Bob, thank you for your questions.
Oh, okay.
They did make sense.
All right,
So as you know, the board approved a water master plan, which is just an overview of our current water system. Where we need to make improvements, where we need to invest capital in the upcoming 5 and 20-year outlook. And we did receive several reports back from the solicitations that we sent out. They were all very close as far as the cost of those. We had $100,000 budget for this project. The spread between the proposals was less than $3,000 total. So we took a look at each firm's expertise, how much experience they had in similar sized utilities, which was important to us, how close their firm was to us, and we recommend that we select the PBI proposal. It is a $104,944 not to exceed cost. Of that, Bob had asked, let me find it. There is a estimated cost breakdown here, Rick, and I think this is something like 76 pages further down.
Okay. It's in the first proposal.
it's page number 74.
Thank you.
Wow.
That was close.
It was pretty close. What they did
Well,
here.
74 and 75. Yeah,
Thank you. So what it shows us here is the total cost of $104,944. And then they have the total cost and it's written with optional task, which should say without. So that optional task is the diving and inspection of our water tanks, which we feel that we need to do. We have not done in several years. We would like to include that. So the total cost not to exceed for this proposal would be the $104,944.
Could you remind where our water tanks are? One is up under chair 5.
Correct.
Where's the other one?
It's up off the top of Dangberg.
Oh, yeah,
So
right. I know where that is.
At the
Yes.
same elevation as the one on chair 5.
turn here.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
about
We balanced them out, right?
Yeah, they're-
It's pretty close.
equal level of elevation, and it's about 950,000 gallons full. Which we
Each
try to
one
keep
is about
full.
just under a
No,
million.
for the whole system.
The whole system's just under $1 million.
And our 5-year permit to dive the tank just came up. That's why we included it. We would have to hire. a separate-
Sorry, I coughed. Would you say that again, please?
We dive, inspect the tank every 5 years, and this permit just expired, so we would have had to go through another RFP to get someone to dive for the tank, so including this would probably be a cost savings measure.
We inspect for cracks and.
Literally go inside the tank, dive
yeah.
around, inspect, videotape for failures, cracks, corrosion, so forth. It's quite interesting and
It is.
wouldn't want to do it.
Yeah, be scuba certified.
Exactly.
It says that the, let's see, rates, so a rate study is upcoming for water. Do we know what year, how far away are we for our next water rate study?
it's in the plan later on.
I should just not suspend.
Um,
Okay, I'll wait.
yeah. There's a master plan that has the timing for all of those things.
Okay, I'll wait.
All right, are there any questions about the water study? Is there any aspect of this that involves making sure we have enough water for fire, or did the fire master plan identify that there's enough?
The fire master plan identified there was enough.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
having plans to improve those tanks for the size of those tanks. And I'd have to also say kudos or nice job to Brandy Benson. You'll notice in the staff report, is it 58? Which is something we don't see very often here at the district. The staff report was prepared by 2 engineers, Eric Christensen and Brandy Benson. So it's really nice to have expert eyes on an RFP that Brandy actually wrote the RFP and worked with Eric on this. So the due diligence and the scoring that they did, I got to listen to part of that. They just did really good work. So
And Brandy's engineering is a recent accomplishment.
Very recent.
So congratulations.
Yeah, thanks for the support.
You just finalized a degree.
My engineering license back
Oh, I
at the
see.
end of last year.
Congratulations and thank
Thank
you.
so she's using it.
More.
Okay, so so I propose a motion to approve the water master plan contract with PBI not to exceed it's really $105,000.
Second, Tucker.
Okay,
Who made it? Were you?
I made the motion.
Okay. Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Tucker, aye. Mitchell,
Aye.
Thornburg, aye. It's unanimous.
Okay, so let's move on to the propane.
We went through a similar process on the propane master plan, except it was a lot harder to find someone to actually put together a proposal for us. There aren't a lot of firms that do a whole lot with large propane systems. So luckily, Stantec was able to put together a proposal using some of their staff. And it's the only one we were able to find. So we talked quite a bit with the Stantec staff. We feel that they have a good understanding of our system, of what we're looking to achieve. This does not include any talk whatsoever about expansion of storage capacity. So this is just what we need to do with our lines, what we need to do with our distribution system, what we need to do with our vaporizers, to make sure that we're able to continue running the propane system as long as the board decides that we want to do that. The total cost for this proposal is $52,000, 51899. And staff recommends that we execute this contract with Stantec.
Are there any questions? Okay,
I often hear there's only one other district in the state that does propane, just out of curiosity. Which one is it?
I know Mammoth has a propane
Oh, down
system.
there? Okay.
But there's another public utility district that does it, and I believe it is Resort Improvement District
Yeah.
number 5 or something. It's up in the northern part of the state. It's very small.
Thank you.
So we are in the world of, there's lots of mobile home parks that do propane, and us.
are there any questions? All right, so is there a motion to move forward with Stantec at not to exceed 52,000?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that your motion or you want me to make the motion?
I think I want you to make.
Okay.
That's
Motion to
well.
approve the Stantec contract for the propane master plan,
Okay.
not to exceed, what was it?
52,000.
52,000.
Second it.
All right, Doug jumps in and the second.
Okay.
Okay. Roll call.
Epstein?
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Tucker,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Thornburg, aye.
Okay, so we're ready to move on to item 9G, the Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department survey results.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm unclear from the agenda. When do we discuss just the timing of upcoming rate studies? I'm asked about water, but then there was also reference to propane.
It'll be in the GM's report. There's a
Well-
chart on, I don't remember which
Oh,
page it is.
I must have blown over that.
That has those items.
Okay. GM report.
Yeah, okay, so Doug.
Yeah.
Turn it over to you to introduce the topic.
Great. Well, thanks you and thank you, everyone. So as a reminder, we have a temporary advisory committee that we formed back in August in 2023 to take a look at the community's perspective on where we want to go with fire and emergency medical services. And so we've had a community forum in December. On the back of that, we took some feedback. We put together a survey and we discussed that survey at the February meeting, board meeting, got board feedback, community feedback, and sent that survey, and it was open for 2 weeks, closing on March 1st. And we now have the survey final results, which you see as a part of the board packet here. And we had a really good turnout. 26% of surveys were responded. So we really appreciate the community taking the time to fill out the survey. It was 8 questions. 2 of them were open-ended. 6 of them were multiple choice. And We also, as a part of all this, put together an FAQ that highlights a lot of the questions that we received in December. And we updated it after the survey, through the process of going through it and reading the comments that were received with some additional feedback. And so we sent out reminders and sent a note out to the community on Tuesday evening, letting them know that they could directly access the results and to welcome people to join the meeting today to hear us talk about the results. And so any questions at a high level on the way it worked or what we did?
Do we
Okay.
have a sense which neighborhoods, which parts of Kirkwood were most responsive to the survey? Or was it pretty balanced?
My understanding it was pretty balanced. We did take a look at it. There was nothing that would make us conclude that any of these results are biased in a certain way towards any area of the Kirkwood community.
Thank you.
So Rick, I'll ask you to scroll through a couple of questions here and I'll stop you a couple of times through. So the first three questions are more of a sentimental perspective on the district, and I will highlight here that most people are positive in terms of their perspective of the emergency medical and fire services we provide. And certainly on question 3, those that have actually engaged with those services are neutral to positive. We're actually having negative responses on questions 3. So that's positive to see a good perception. Questions 4 and 5, Rick, if you want to scroll down, are the two that really focus, I would say, the most on what the board really charged the TAP with, which is to ask what the levels of service and some level of funding from the community. And so if you scroll down just a little bit here, Rick, so you can see the percentages. So this is about the level of service, and it's hard to see in the text here, but the survey that actually showed it was a table that characterized this a little bit better, where the options were the current level of services and then some descriptions of what minimum, basic, and a professional level of service, with some people allowed to put other in as well. One way to look at this is we have about 25% or so of the community that wants to maintain at the current level of service, but we do have about 50% of the community or more that is at the minimum to basic level of service. And so there is a range of answers here, and some people even going, over 10% of people wanting to go to a fully professional level of service. So there is certainly a range of opinions throughout the community. With, like I said, about a quarter wanting to maintain the service of the respondents, and then up to professional in some cases. And then in question 5, if you can scroll down again, Rick, this goes into the funding. And here it's again, about 25% of people. And when you cross tabulate this a little bit, it's as kind of one would expect that it's, along the diagonal, if you will, of people who want this current level of service, mostly putting that they want the current charging, and then the people who are going for higher levels of service willing to pay a little bit more. And so here you can see about 75% of the community is willing to pay more than they do today. And so I think that's one way to look at these results. 23% looks like are the current charge. So if you scroll down again, there are a couple of other questions here that are related to how we should structure it relative to inflation. So the majority of respondents indicated that we could use an inflation adjustment on it. And then question 7, if you keep scrolling, Rick, we'll talk about a question that we talked about as a board in depth at the last meeting, and talking about how we might want to have one level of funding sources using property taxes, which in order to do so would be requiring us to move some of the use of that taxes that we use for other services that we have to fire, which would cause a rate increase in those areas. And about 2/3 of the community responded that they would not want us to investigate that as a primary source of funding for the fire department. And then question 8, I will not try to summarize, but all of the open-ended responses are included here below. And I encourage everyone to take the time to read them. I think really appreciate, again, the community taking the time to not only fill out the survey, but also add specific comments. And as I said before, things that were questions in here, we tried to address in the FAQ that has now been updated on the KMPUD website and available for everyone to take a look at, which is also included here as a part of the board packet.
So good survey, good project overall. How do you interpret question 7 on using property taxes? How do you interpret that response?
I think if I interpret directly, meaning that people do not want to see rate increases in other areas to fund this. And if you look at some of the comments in question 8, I think my sense is that people also are responding to this in a homeowners versus other sources of revenue perspective. And so I think there are some aspects of that that need to be taken into consideration. So I think it's encouraging the district to look for multiple ways of funding the volunteer fire department.
Thanks.
And so, Rick, I don't know if you can flip all the way towards the end here on the TAC report. And I'm sorry that we have the reports kind of in a later section of the board packet, but
Yeah, I thought it was on 111 and it clearly is not. Maybe I overshot it.
I think maybe go scroll down. I think it's actually at the very end, potentially.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's right there.
That's it. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. And so as a TAC, we met multiple times since the last board meeting, so you can see all the dates here to talk about this and get the survey out to discuss the results, discuss the FAQ, all of the things that I've mentioned earlier to lead off. Also documented again some of the history here, just so we can keep track of what the results were and everything. But we really did come out with a couple of recommendations as an advisory committee here. Number one, we think that we should explore looking at the minimum to basic levels of service in terms of how that could be structured in that range. And then the second is, has components to it, but we want to explore multiple avenues to generate revenue. And I think, again, kind of to Chris, your question a second ago, and my response to it is, I think from my interpretation of what I read and the feedback that we received is that I think the community is certainly interested in having a department. 75% of people want a higher level of service than we potentially have now. Pay for more level of service than we have now. But how we pay for that, I think, is important given the feedback that we saw. And I think one of the things I learned a little bit about going through this process was the state assistance by hire program, which was highlighted in our FAQ about Eastern Alpine and Bear Valley, and investigating what that could be, because my understanding that can generate hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue for fire departments in these rural communities who go out and help CAL FIRE, the Forest Service, in the summers. I think we thought that this 218 process should get started as an investigation, and it can increase annually with inflation. The 218 process is something that will take 6 months, 12 months for it to actually materialize. So starting it now will give us the flexibility to actually have it in flight and reap the benefits of having it going later on. Certainly want to be talking to Kirkwood Mountain Resort. Those conversations have been happening. I've had them. I'm sure other board members have had them. Ricky, it's great to see you at the meeting, and thank you for taking the time to join. But we need to continue to have those conversations. If you read a lot of the comments, people are wondering about Kirkwood Mountain Resort and their perspective and contributions to all of this. And I think, as I mentioned, generating the revenue from many different places here as much as we can, and we should look at other places. I think the state assistance for hire is certainly one that's very viable, but there's other options like the transient occupancy taxes, mutual aid agreements, some sorts of cost recoveries. Rick had mentioned that we haven't looked at some of those items in a long time. And as a reminder, all of these things have orders of magnitude in terms of the amount of dollars that they could bring in. And so I think, the recommendation would be to start with the ones that can generate the most revenue and work from there. And so those are the outcomes I think the TAC really congealed around in terms of ideas. I also highlight here in the second, if you scroll down just a little bit, Rick, here is that the TAC, I copied and pasted from the board minutes back from August, what the charge of the TAC was to do. And that at this point, I do believe that the TAC, and certainly that it's a temporary advisory committee, and the word temporary does mean it should end. I do believe that we've fulfilled the requests that were made and the charge that was given to us. And so the other recommendation that I would suggest that the board consider is now disbanding the temporary advisory committee. But obviously, I think we need to be taking actions, but not necessarily through the temporary advisory committee at this point. And I have some ideas on what a motion could look like to take next steps. But at that point, I'll stop and I'll just open it up to any questions. Peter, obviously you've been involved in this as the other board member on the TAC, if you have anything to add or any questions from the rest of the board.
No, I think that we achieved making people aware of the challenges of having a volunteer fire department in Kirkwood. I think a lot of people weren't aware that all the problems we've been facing in the shortfalls. So that's a good starting point. I think, if we had had time to do this prior to Measure E, it might have come out a little bit differently. But it's great that the community is aware, and we're just going to have to keep working away at it. See if we can find some funding.
And I'll also mention, I see that there are other members of the advisory committee on the Zoom call as well. So if anyone else there wants to add anything, I'd welcome them to give feedback as well, because obviously we were a good team effort on this. So just want to give that opportunity to folks.
Yeah, why don't we hear from the other TAC members?
This is gonna be Sandy Goldberg.
Okay, Sandy, welcome. Unmute, and we're ready to hear.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for taking my hand up. And I just want to say thank you to Doug again. He led a great committee, and it was an honor to be part of it. I really want to stress to the board to take a really good look at the results, especially question 4. 67% of the responses, which is a household, they want more than what we have right now. And of that 67%, 31% want to see us at that basic level, which is 1 paid fire chief and 3 paid firefighters, paramedics, and volunteers. So that's why our committee decided to recommend something, between the two, the intermediate and the basic, or the minimum and basic. But I guess I just want to point out that the majority of the people really want to see basic. So if the board can find money, other than the 218 process, which certainly is going to have to happen, to cover where we are now and get us closer to minimum, I would really, really encourage the board to strive to find more money, whether it be through the other things listed, plus Kirkwood Mountain Resort. Then the fire department could be structured to increase it to that basic level, which would be wonderful to help everyone. So thank you. That's it.
And thank you, Sandy, and thank you for your participation. Eric Rickert. Eric, the floor is yours. Or did he just disappear?
He's one below, muted maybe?
Oh, no, the Zoom for some reason decided to stop on me as I was.
We hear you.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Unmuting. So anyway, I just like to support Sandy in her comments. I went through the exercise of going through the results and doing I know it's oversimplified, but a 2x2, sort of a, y-axis of, do you want to more or less more service, from no to yes, and the same with, are you willing to pay more from no to yes? And I include minimum and current in the no on the vertical axis, and the current and the 2.5% inflation in the no on the horizontal axis. And then all the rest of the level of service and the yes, and the rest of the pay more in the yes. It's very balanced between the no and the yes, and it's also and those are the majority of answers, like Doug suggested. But there's also a balance between the yes, no, and the no, yes boxes. So my takeaway, and I understand it's simplified, but it's a very interesting way to visualize things, is that something in the upper right-hand part of that no box, which I would suggest would be something like 2 paid professionals, and maybe something like a $750,000 budget. And I think that a 218 process plus discussion with the resort plus exploration of these other things could actually quite easily get us to that budget level. And I think that it would also garner at least 51% of the support of the community in a 218 process. So I would definitely encourage a little bit of a stretch above the minimum. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Is that everyone who's on the committee?
Jack
Jack
just raised his
wanted-
hand.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Jack, you
Jack,
need to
go-
unmute.
Am I in now?
You
Yes, you
are,
can.
and thank
Okay.
you for your participation.
I just want to add my support and concurrence with Sandy's comments and Eric's. I think the survey is very helpful. However, I think we're still sort of amateurs at surveys, and when you look at the various comments that came through, I think directionally they're sound, but there's a lot of confusion in the community. I don't think we made the community experts on the fire department and circumstances. So I think the leaning towards a higher level of competency in the fire department staff is the right way for the board to look at this. I certainly endorse that, and that's my reading of the responses we got back. And of course, it is a matter of money and how we can fund this. I think a lot of the respondents were aware that money was part of the issue, and I'm not sure that the facts, even as comprehensive as they are, provided enough information for the respondents to really understand the trade-offs between the funding and the level of expertise we need in a growing community here. So I just strongly endorse Sandy's commentary and the recommendation that the board look towards a more well-developed fire department rather than the bare minimum. Thank you.
Jack, this is Chris. You made a comment about the community still having confusion. I was going to ask you over what key points you think there is confusion, but then you did mention cost. What is the confusion you think people have?
I just think it's not so much a confusion, it's just not a full appreciation. I'm not sure if you polled some of the respondents about the simple issue of, do we have a fire department that can enter a burning building, and how many qualified people do we need for us to be able to effectively do that, where you have to have one outside and one inside. I don't think that you would find that everybody really understood that's part of the issue here. It's a small part of the issue, but very big. If a building is on fire and we need to enter it. And I think there are other issues of that sort that just aren't fully appreciated. Therefore, the cost issue, which if it's a matter of a respondent feeling that their pocketbook is already putting too much money into the Kirkwood community for other things, ski tickets, taxes, utilities, etc., that they have a bias towards a less costly solution for the fire department issue. That's just sort of a matter of gut instinct. If you can't appreciate the trade-offs.
Right. Well, I agreed with what Peter said at the beginning, that it was quite an accomplishment just to raise awareness. And I saw that happening at the big event in December in Red Cliffs. You could see people, sort of the lights going on. But I also agree with what you're saying, Jack, because it's as if we've just only learned how much we don't know. Whether it's like which part of the volunteer corps can do medical of any kind, which part can enter a bill, are certified and qualified to enter a building or not. I'm not sure what we do about that, Peter, other than just doing more of what I saw in December and the FAQs that Doug has put out, the committee has put out there. But yeah, I think you're onto something, Jack. People don't. Now I know what you mean by the confusion. That's
Yeah,
all.
we certainly made the community aware of the issue, and I think that's why we got a 26% response, which is pretty good. But I don't think we made them experts on fire departments for small remote communities and what kinds of problems go along with that and how they have to be solved.
I hope the FAQ, which seems really good to me, will be a step in that direction.
Okay, good. So I'd like to open it up to broad question and answer, but before I do that, there's the open question whether the TAC has fulfilled the mission that we asked for. I believe it has.
Yeah, I agree.
And so I would like to first suggest resolution number 24-03, which would express our appreciation as a board for the TAC members. So I took the liberty of drafting something. I'd like to read it and see if people agree. Whereas the KMPUD board wishes to recognize the contribution of the members of the Fire Services Temporary Advisory Committee, and whereas, I'll just list the first names: Doug, Peter, Bertrand, Rick, Eric, Dan, and Flora, Sandy, Joel, Jack, and John were members, whereas the committee has made a valuable contribution in educating the Kirkwood community and soliciting the community's opinions on the future direction of the Kirkwood Volunteer Fire Department. On behalf of the board and the entire community, we thank you.
Good.
All right, so is there a motion to approve resolution 2303? We'll send it to the members.
Yeah, motion to approve resolution 2303.
Okay, second?
I second it, Tucker.
Okay. Roll call?
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Duker,
Aye.
Mitchell-Rhonda,
Aye.
Robert Guy.
Okay, we thank you all. The temporary is now completed. So let's open it up to questions. And I think, Greg, you had
Yeah.
You want- you go first.
I'm a retired firefighter, 7 years fire captain, 33 years, worked for CAL FIRE for 16, worked for Livermore Pleasanton for 17. And I think, Doug Killen with the last gentleman was speaking, I think there was some confusion, maybe all the facts weren't on the table, and not to downplay the fire department in any manner. I would never say less fire, less fire department. I've been here since 85. I've seen Sun Meadows explode, seen 2 houses on my street explode. The best I can say is I think a lot of people aren't aware of the amount of commercial buildings here are sprinkled. So I think they feel like maybe there's a bigger threat than there actually is. Typically 99.9% of fires are put out by one fire sprinkler head or less. You're still gonna have water damage. I know most of the homes are, what's the square footage over 4,000 with already sprinkler. So there's a lot of different areas I could speak to regarding this, all the way down to medical aids. But I'll just start the fire part first. The 2 in, 2 out, that's a OSHA standard. NFPA requires or suggests 15 firefighters on an initial response for a first alarm assignment. That would be 3 engines and a truck, whenever you're gonna do that. 80% of a city's budget is typically budgeted for police and fire. We're not gonna do that. And I know the issue is really with generating revenue and generating interest and being in the fire department here. And I can speak to those as well. I've never worked for the fire department here. I wish I had been involved with it over the years. I bought my home here in 92. I actually got a disability retirement because my neck's fused, so I can't participate other than like in a training capacity, which I'd like to be able to do at some point, whether it's wildland or otherwise. But back to the 2 in, 2 out, if it's a life safety threat, that is, there's a car parked in the driveway, that's enough to bypass the 2 in, 2 out. Those first 2 arriving firefighters can go in if they have a known life rescue or an anticipated life rescue. So a lot of people think, oh, we don't have staffing for it. Chances are, you're gonna need more firefighters any way you look at it. And I understand there's a recruitment issue. And I think some of the things that we didn't really speak to, and maybe, I'm ignorant to it as well. I've been out for 7 years, retired. And I'm not really privy to recruiting and whatnot, but the local colleges typically require X amount of hours for a student to get their firefighter one certificate. And then that involves doing ride-alongs with the fire department. They do the didactic at school, but then they also have to do ride-alongs. So I'd suggest maybe looking at the potential students to come out and do ride-alongs for additional staffing. And also those kids have the most up-to-date training and whatnot through the school, which could help the volunteers as well. I don't know if any of that's been addressed. I can even speak to having a full-time paid department coming in here, and what I've seen in the past with that. When you work at a slow station, it's just like law enforcement. You put 2 guys out here, typically that's gonna be your minimum staffing. They're gonna be bored to death. You're gonna think, oh, we're gonna have all this time for training, we're gonna do all this stuff. It doesn't work out that way. When you have 2 guys that are running calls, they're gonna find out that they don't wanna be signed here. And what's gonna happen, if it, say it's Amador, it's gonna become an overtime position. So they can say, oh, the Gravy's out of Kirkwood, let's go work our 24 or 48 out of Kirkwood. That's great. Now you're paying additional for overtime because you don't have your general folks out here. Because again, it's not active. You're not running your 5-10 calls a day and whatnot. So that's something to think about. Again, I'd never downplay having a fire department. I think it really goes to recruitment and where the funding's going to come from. I don't know if we've looked at grants. Those are available, state, federal, and also, why isn't CAL FIRE looking at working here? Why isn't Forest Service in the area? And when you activate 911, as far as I know, you're gonna get CHP, you're gonna get sheriff, you're gonna get other resources that are EMTs. EMTs can't give injections unless you're an EMTP or advanced. So you got a stroke, you got a heart attack, you're not gonna be able to push meds. You're down to EMTs, which is basic life support. You can do CPR, you can defib, you can airway breathing circulation. So there's a little misnomer, people thinking, oh, we're gonna have a fire department, we're gonna be able to have these advanced life-saving measures take place, which aren't gonna happen with EMTs. You're gonna have to wait for the paramedics to be here. Either the helicopter flying in, if it's trauma, you have a golden hour to get somebody to the hospital. You're gonna have to fly them anyway to Reno. So you have a major vehicle accident on the highway, you need to get those people within an hour. That's when they start to fade after. So another thing to think about, and that my apologies for not making the meeting in December. I would have loved to have been able to address this stuff, and I'm not a Toastmaster, I'm not a big speaker, I'm a little bit nervous talking, but I think these things should have been addressed. And I know it's hard. I feel the frustration. You know, when I work with CAL FIRE, we work with volunteer departments all the time, and we coordinated training with them. You know, we come out to their stations as well as send our people to their station. And that was part of that whole automated agreement. When you have an accident in a certain area of the highway, you got the closest resource responding to it, but you're still gonna need a transport. Where's that coming from?
Right.
Coming from South Lake, coming from Pioneer. So again, you're looking at this time thing and getting more firefighters here aren't necessarily gonna provide you a higher level of service, unfortunately, in my opinion. You know, just for the reasons I spoke to. You know, I'd love to see more guys show up. I'd love to see more in the department and you know, higher level of training, and you know, God bless the guys that are in there doing the best that they can.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's good. Other comments? Wanna speak? Any online? Okay.
Bob, just a quick response. to
Yeah,
Craig.
that'd be great, Rick.
Happy to talk with you about all the things we have been doing and have done. Some of the information you have is absolutely correct, but some of it is not. So maybe we can talk afterwards, and you'd love to have you come on the department and help train. So
Thank you.
and there is some, you know, it's risk versus gain essentially. And right now we have personnel, but we don't have enough to really fight a structure fire without support. But in times where, like last weekend when Carson Pass is closed, you know, it's pretty much we all help each other to get through the event. And so anything we can do as a district, as a fire department, to try to promote that and to get us to another level, you know, now's the time to do it, because it's not sustainable, as we talked about before Measure E, during the fire forum, and of course during this fire attack committee formulation. We're on dire straits, so I appreciate whatever the board considers and looking for some good staff direction to try to move us forward to a place that I feel comfortable. As the
Rick,
fire-
what do you and the KDFD do, like last week, when a big storm and a shut-in is near certain? How do you shift gears and prepare, what happens differently?
We try to staff up as best we can for when we know that there's going to be an event like this one where the pass could close for several days. So like Vail, we prepare for the event,
That
but
means staffing people, making sure they're in Valley.
yes, correct. But during the event, we're an island, and there was an example last month where it was reported chest pain and the pass was closed. And so we had to work closely with Caltrans, with Lake Valley Medic 7, Barton Hospital, to determine whether the risk of the person's injury here in Kirkwood was greater than putting several Caltrans members in plows trying to create a path over Carson Pass to get them to the hospital. And ultimately, it was decided not to make that move and put more people in harm's way. But again, I look forward to working with Kirkwood Mountain Resort and Ricky and Mountain County's EMS and El Dorado Medical Services to try to come up with a good solution that's legal and also provides the best possible service we can in such a remote
Is
location.
there any one authority who made that decision or typically makes that decision when there's disagreement?
We worked it as a unified command, so collectively we came up with these decisions. But like Caldor Fire, we do what we can during the event and try to make it work, and hopefully it does, and it has so far.
It's a good question. If I could just add on to it for our isolation event. So we subsidize the Barton Ski Clinic. We work with Barton Memorial Hospital during the ski operation from opening day until closing day, from 10 a.m. until the mountains clear at sweep. What we did for this past isolation event, which was kind of unique, we've been working for this and we pulled it off. We had Dr. Lance Orr, who's a ER board certified tech, stay in the valley with us. And we had
Is that a Barton person?
Tahoe Emergency Physicians.
Thank
They
you.
work directly with Barton, but they're their own entity.
Mhm.
And then we had a nurse and X-ray tech, a rad tech, stay with us. So for us with the operation, like that was our goal. We achieved it that last weekend. I think the big thing, like I can't speak as an expert to fire. I'm aware of fires in the valley and response, and again, grateful for all the firefighters as well. But I can speak to EMS with my background in ski patrolling. I've worked with many variations of the clinic. I would say they're like the two levels that we want to call out are basic life support, like an EMT basic, like I am, and then ALS care, advanced life support, and that's the paramedic level and above. As an EMT basic, like if Greg and I, when we're sleeping in our offices and he eats nuts and he's allergic and has anaphylactic shock, right? There's like a certain level of care I can do, and then I need ALS care. If he falls down and breaks his femur while he's shoveling the steps, I can't do pain management as an EMT basic, but a paramedic can. So same thing with the clinic and that ALS care. And so that's speaking for Kirkwood Mountain Resort, I would say like as a parent here, in this valley, like ALS care is what I would want for my wife, for my daughters.
Could you remind ALS, please?
Advanced life support.
Thank you.
Yeah, so advanced airways and pain management. So I think we can all align on that as like a common goal. EMT basics are good to a point. But what I want and what I've worked hard to get is the Barton Clinic staffed to that ALS care and our willingness to subsidize that. As far as steps moving forward, I know we've had creative conversations of how we've got a staff of about 40 EMTs on patrol. Where is there reciprocity? Where is there good neighbor relations in the community? How can we help support volunteer fire departments? So I just want to be really distinct in that, kind of building off your question, but When I'm out here, I'm thinking of like myself and what level of care I want. I'm thinking of my coworkers and the community, and that's super important.
Can we, then am I hearing that Vale and PUD are in touch and synchronizing when a big isolation event is imminent? And so on things like Barton staffing, EMS staffing, whether it's from your team or PUD's, are you in touch before a big imminent storm?
I would say not as good as I think we can be. And this goes back to the meeting with the medical directors and then getting county alignment and policy writers to write a memorandum of understanding where when Rick responds to a 911 call, at this point, you can't take the patient to the clinic where there's a board certified doctor. So we're missing on best patient care, right? And we're missing on basic common sense of like, why would you want me as an EMT basic tending to somebody that's dead and dying, right? When we can get them to a board certified doc for advanced level care. So we're working on that as next steps moving forward in the community.
Yeah.
And correct me if I misspoke anything there for your current scope.
No, and Greg alluded to it, you know, it's that golden hour and we're trying to do the best we can for that patient. And I don't want to wait for an ALS rig when I've got a doctor 5 seconds or 5 minutes away. So it's something that we're going to try to improve and work on, but it's complicated, unfortunately. We have to follow state law. We have to go through, for me, my medical director through Mountain County's EMS and get them to agree with what's going on with the clinic and Kirkwood and Ski Patrol. And so we're starting that process now, and the goal, according to Tom Morton, who's with Mountain County's EMS, my medical authority, my director, Dr. Freeman, is that we want to try to get something solidified or in place by next winter, and then do the best we can for the balance of this year. So it's going to take a little while to work this out. But the clinic is only open half the time. It's here. It's great in the winter, but in the summer, it turns back to Kirkwood Fire as your emergency responder.
Oh, after ski season, yes.
Yeah. So.
I agree with what you said about advanced life support, because I had an incident about 15 years ago at my house. I had a guest had a seizure, but I'm not a trained professional, so I didn't know if he had a heart attack, an aneurysm, a seizure. And I was very happy that Rick showed up, Chief Ansel showed up, and we got him taken into South Tahoe. And if they weren't there, I would have been carrying the guy out, putting him in the back of my car, and it'd been a terrible experience, right?
This seems to be an opportunity. This seems to be something that it warrants follow-up. I don't know in what form or how it goes from a meeting like this into operational discussions. But for you and Eric, I would like to hear more about this in the months ahead, and you plan to next year.
Yeah. So I have a motion that I can make that will address that point, Chris, if we're ready to get to that point.
Yeah, so Doug has tried to absorb all this and try to identify what are the next couple of steps that he would recommend the board.
Oh, coming out of the
proceed with.
attack, you mean?
Yeah, and this discussion. So why don't we
Sure.
go to
Okay.
that?
So I thank you, Bob, and thanks for the discussion and for the community feedback and the TAC for commenting as well. So I tried to synthesize some of my earlier thoughts and synthesizing in some of the comments that I heard here today into 5 items that I would like to make a motion for. And these are in prioritized order, so that will inform us as a board on how we want to move forward with the KVFD and potential funding. So number 1 is I would like us to recommend that staff create and distribute an RFP, a request for proposal, to firms that can conduct a 218 process. And once those are received, staff evaluates them and make a recommendation similar to some of the things we already discussed in today's meeting. We need to get that process started now because it is a longer process, and it's pretty clear that we are going to need that process. So that's number 1. Number 2 is for our fire chief to think about budgeting options for the KFD that would allow full-time, at least a minimum of full-time or part-time professional staffing. And I want those options to range from the minimum and up to the basic proposals that were explored and presented in this survey. I think that's with the community identified. And so let's have some options. When we did this back at Measure E, there were options that the fire chief had put together, and it gives us a range of things to think about in terms of budget and how that could work. Number 3 would be to have the general manager present options for the budgeting, staffing, the organizational structure that might have to be enabled to have, say, a fire chief position that might be a paid position full-time, looking into the next fiscal year, and how that plays out with potential changes to any of the fire services fees. So basically, operationally and structurally, how do we need to be prepared for any changes that we make so that we get to the point, if we have the ability to do these things, we're ready to take action. Number 4 is that staff continues to have conversations and with Ricky and the Kirkwood Mountain Resort team regarding fire and emergency medical services. And I think what we heard today is that there are opportunities for collaboration and complementary efforts in fire and emergency medical services where we can really help each other and not be redundant in the efforts that we're doing. So I would really like to encourage us to have that be an engaged and organized and like a documented process. And then number 5 is that we continue to have the staff investigate other sources of funding beyond the 218. I think the community was very clear that they don't want it just to be on homeowners. They want us to make sure that we're thinking broadly. So that should include things like the state assistance by hire, transient occupancy tax, and mutual aid agreements, but not necessarily limited to just those. Let's start with those ones as the higher priorities. And that is my motion.
I second. Joker.
So open for discussion.
Would concur with what Doug has presented.
Yeah, I'm supportive.
Okay. Then is there a second?
I jumped the gun and seconded it because I support it too.
Oh, okay, right. All right, then roll call, please.
Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Tucker,
I
Mitchell,
Aye.
Dornberg, aye.
would descend from it around now.
Okay, good. Are there any other comments on this topic? If not, this will be.
I just want
Yeah.
to say thank you again. This is my last chance on recognizing the TAC and the members that are on the call. Chief Ansel in particular has been a great partner from a staff perspective, and all of the members have been really worked so hard to put on events. This range from event planning to survey design to synthesis of results and working across the community. And I just really want to thank all the time and effort from everyone on the community who's been involved in this, and for folks who responded. And it's been a really wonderful experience. So I really thank everyone, and thanks for the board's support through it all.
Thank you, Doug. Okay. And next topic, major projects update.
So in the board's packet on page 112 is the long-term major projects, and you can show what's been done, of course, in flight and what's been scoped. And this is what, Chris, you were asking about earlier.
Yeah, I believe it's
I think you want to
110.
scroll another page up or two.
110. Move up to.
Oops. There it is.
There you go.
Thank you. That's the other one was the scoping. So really no updates other than for our wastewater treatment plant in the last month. And you probably saw in the newsletter, they've done some serious deconstruction of the internal offices of the treatment plant, which we were very excited to see. And mold, they removed all the mold, all the asbestos. It was definitely a hazardous place behind the scenes, but it's been all cleaned up. The framing's been done. There are still weekly meetings to go over the project, but really no big changes. Last week there was a pause because the project manager was on vacation, and of course the storm came in and shut down a couple of days of construction. But as far as I know, everything's on schedule, and I haven't heard of any additional or new change orders in reflection to the wastewater treatment plant project. Other than that, as you saw today, we had a couple RFPs. Brandy presented to those 2 engineer reports that were approved, and that's pretty much the update at the time.
And the electric master plan was completed. We got the final, right?
Yes.
So that's now done.
And that's it.
Are there any questions on this chart? You asked about a wastewater study. You can see that that's scheduled to start in the summer of this year.
Q3 24 means that means January, it's already started. Yeah, we're in Q3, right?
Oh. We're still well into Q1.
But this is fiscal year, right?
Those quarters are calendar
Oh,
quarters.
excuse me, I assumed they were fiscal.
Sorry if, yeah, that's not clear, but yeah, this is all calendar.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So operations, you want to move on to that?
Sure, and just be real brief. I know, we're all familiar with the storm that happened last week, but I just want to thank staff for their hard work of keeping the lights on, keeping the water running. We did have an issue at our main lift last Saturday. Randy got to be part of that. Where we lost one, we have two pumps that flip back and forth. One of the pumps got clogged. So they had to do a quick pull the pump out of a 30-foot pit and clean the clog out. I won't tell you what it was, but
And this was while it was snowing.
while it was snowing, we literally had to take a plow and cut a trail to the main lift to get to it.
To the main lift.
The main lift is the lowest point in the valley for our collection system. So we bring, in fact, I'm gonna give you a tour on Monday, I think. We'll have to talk afterwards.
Yeah.
But all the wastewater ends at this, terminates at the main lift, and then it gets pumped back into the treatment plant.
So we're not talking chair 6. Wink, wink.
Yeah.
Kidding.
No, it's that little A-frame behind the
I just
treatment plant.
skied by it.
But that was probably our biggest hiccup, other than snow removal blower issues and some equipment problems that we had to work through. And again, thank you to Crooked Mountain Resort and Ricky and his team for helping us out with that.
I think it might be appropriate to mention what plugged up the lift, where somebody flushed down their toilet.
I'd rather not say, but you shouldn't
Well,
put
was it
anything in the toilet that shouldn't go in the toilet. Maybe that's a newsletter article, actually.
Pair of underwear. Flush down the toilet.
Men's or ladies? I can forget it.
Men's.
Brief or boxer? Okay, let's move on.
It's just, I mean, that's what we have to deal with at times. People doing really idiotic flushes.
Is that some of the filter? You caught in the filter.
It's a chopper pump and it couldn't chop it. So anyway, that concludes the operations report unless there's any more questions.
Well, I think it'd be helpful if Brandy could comment on how we manage propane during this cycle.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. Propane, John Campbell has been doing an excellent job with scheduling propane this year. As we've talked about before, we have 2 different vendors that are both supplying us regularly. He was able to get multiple loads in before the storm ending on Thursday. Roads closed. We were at 80%, which is as high as our tank levels should be for safety purposes. Starting the storm, so there was no hurry to get anybody in here after the storm, and we started getting deliveries again on Wednesday. So in the world of what we would like to see propane be, this is what we want to see. Levels as high as possible before the storm, and then taking our time to fill them back up.
With an 80% readiness, going into a storm like we just faced, you never know, of course, how many people are going to be shut in and not, but how many days do you count on that covering, worst case?
Worst case scenario, we could look at 10% a day.
10% a day,
So
8 days.
So we could get 8 days, but it was not the highest levels of occupancy. It would be much worse if this had happened in terms of propane over Christmas, New Year's, when a bunch of people were just planning to be here.
Yeah.
So our levels were fine. Our usage wasn't too bad. Even on Wednesday, we were not nervous yet, whereas last year, several times I had to come here and say we were nervous, right?
In a Christmas, New Year's timeframe, where big storm comes, I mean, there's, at a couple days in advance, of course, people can escape if they want, but they don't. Does the 10% still apply? That's
Average, it's about average.
It's about 8 days.
About the highest.
Worst case.
It's
Okay.
also a function of temperature.
Yeah.
So last year
Yeah,
we
of course.
modeled it with both temperature and and occupancy.
Yeah.
And in an extreme situation, we can probably go 9 days and still have some fumes left.
Yes, if we start at 80.
Yeah, and 80%, just to clarify, the tank can't be fully pressurized.
Understood.
So 80% is full as a starting point, and we don't really want to go below 20.
We don't want to go below 20.
But,
Below
but
20,
we've gone to single digits and
We have several,
But we
at least-
don't-
at
yeah.
least twice last year, we were in single
Right.
digits, and I was very nervous.
so I just really want to commend the staff, both in terms of propane management and keeping the roads open. It's a world of difference over last year, and it's a mixture of just willingness to be there, having people on the mountain, having the equipment, and just the determination to make it all work. And then the coordination certainly is helpful.
I agree. And we'll talk about communications in just a moment. But this would seem, Rick, you mentioned it already. Some of the things from the recent storm cycle could be highlights of the newsletter. The cooperation with Vail on snow removal, the propane readiness, et cetera.
Okay, so that's the operations report. So standing committee reports, start with finance.
Nothing to add.
Okay. Operations.
I don't have anything to add at this point.
Okay, and personnel didn't meet, so communications, Doug?
Sure, just a couple of things to add beyond what was reported. So Rick, if you could scroll down. We're going through these general protocols and procedures for communications. We'll present them all as a full document. We went through the general procedures and protocols first, and we're going to then go through service by service after that. So that's why you're not going to see anything for maybe a couple more months in terms of those policies. The other thing that we're doing in parallel is we're creating FAQs. As you saw earlier today during our conversation on fire and emergency medical services, we already have a pretty extensive FAQ that we've already built there. And so the intent in the long run from the communications committee is to have that always available. And we'll update that, as things continue to evolve, certainly for fire and emergency medical services. But for snow removal, for electric, for propane, those are the ones that we're starting with to build similarly styled FAQs that we'll be able to have on the website. And hopefully, as new questions come in that aren't answered, we will continue to update it. And it's, an easy place for us to add new questions and answers to help the community understand, how things work and, how to contact people and to get questions answered. The other thing I'll highlight is if you scroll down the next page, Rick, I alluded to this, go up right on the spreadsheet here. Thank you. I alluded to this verbally last meeting, but we have a project plan. So basically doing project management through a spreadsheet here to keep track of tasks that we are working on and trying to put some general guidelines on. So this is our roadmap of what we are going to be tackling as a committee going forward. And so, as I mentioned, staff is assigned the protocols and procedures, just so that we can continue to make progress as fast as we can. The committee members have individually taken on some of the FAQ first drafts of at least drafting the questions and then asking staff to fill in the answers. And so that the assignment will go to staff and then we'll review it and bring it to the board. But if you ever have thoughts or questions about what we're working on, we are keeping this as our living document that we will continue to update. I've added some things here based off of going through the survey, for example, the last row about how we can add comments regarding surveys to just be more clear in some areas and things like that. And so if you have any comments or questions on things that you think communications should discuss, please let me know. This is where we add it to the list, and I'll make sure that this is a part of the board packets going forward each month.
Okay, thank you. So planning, Chris?
Yeah. So last month we decided and voted on the the residential customer rebates and incentives programs. This was for things like, first of all, this was usage of our PVC funds, which to date, over the last couple of years, accumulate to about 80,000 and grow at about 40-something thousand dollars a year. These are funds that are mandated that we use for designated purposes, and one such purpose is a residential customer rebate program, converting from propane-powered heating to a heat pump, for example, upgrading refrigerators to or ovens to electric-based. And so that was all put into place at our last meeting, that those decisions were reported and discussed, and now it transitions out of our, that topic transitions out of our committee. A low income program is the next thing, and I'm a little confused why maybe I failed to get it onto the agenda for this month for a vote, but we have our recommendation there, and I don't quite know why, but that, I guess we'll wait for next meeting for decision and vote. The big topic now occupying the planning committee is the question of fuel switching with our larger non-residential, our larger customers, top 10, top 20 users of propane. And Vale, is it, I'll refer to you, do we refer to you as KMR also, or is that
KMR.
a label from, okay, good. So Kirkwood Mountain is of course with multiple different accounts, the largest commercial user, and so those discussions have begun. Ricky mentioned them, a call, think of it as a pre-meeting that was on this Wednesday this Wednesday. We have invited all of the larger customers, these are typically multi-unit HOAs, condominium buildings, to start a discussion with PUD staff. Some of us on the committee participate a little bit in those meetings, but it's driven by staff. So the 3 or 4 of them who so far have expressed interest, and we may get a couple more by next week, will attend our next committee meeting, which is, I think, the 20th. And the dialogue then begins. With the goal, perhaps a modest goal, is simply to understand what is the state of play today in terms of feasibility. Is it even possible, realistic, worth even exploring whether any one of these customers might or wants to contemplate conversion? And if so, conversion to electrical, of course. And if so, how PUD could help with a feasibility assessment study, consulting projects, etc. We have that PBC fund I mentioned to put to that use. So as I said, we expect to get 3 or including KMR customers at our next meeting on the 20th, and that will be the entire agenda. I'll stop there and report more next month.
Okay. Thanks. And then LAFCO did not meet, so that covers all the committees. All right, so now the general board discussion is an opportunity for board members to bring up items that were not on the agenda. Anybody
I
have
just have
anything?
one thought that came up through our conversation on some of the electric and reporting was before that, like the 3.6 million kilowatt hours is something that I don't typically remember. And I was just wondering if it would be useful. I haven't decided if it'd be useful or not, but just something to think about is having a chart that talks about our budget, current, then projecting out, adding on budgeted, and then having a line of, where the fixed costs get embedded. So for something like electric, it could help us remember, are we going to be on target to hit our minimum amount, or how much more are we going to be projected over, the baseline for what's covered? It helps us cover our fixed cost given the rate structures that we have for each of the services.
The chart was in the December board package.
That
When
one
we
was?
when we talked about moving off of dam onto contract.
Okay, well, I was thinking more of like, should we have it continually as a part of that same, or at least putting the $3.6 million in?
I think the 3.6 is pretty safe at this point.
I'm just saying to have that highlighted somewhere so we remember that. I don't remember that number very easily. My point is just that I don't remember that number. So having it either put as a part of that chart or on that table as a number that we can keep track of, or making a chart of it that we could keep tracking of every month, but just noting the number that we need to hit to cover our fixed costs.
When you say safe, you mean we've already passed the 3.6, right?
I think 3.6 for a calendar year is quite conservative at this point. I mean, we hit 7 last year.
Yeah.
And if the resort stays open longer, then there's more electricity used. Okay, so that completes this board meeting. We're going to go into closed session for an update on the labor negotiations and then adjourn. But thank you all for attending.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
And then we'll see where we're gonna meet. Rick, do you know, room is the corral spray?
It's open, it's messy, so your option is to go in a messy office or stay here.
I think messy office sounds great.
I'm gonna
Okay, we are back. We finished the closed session regarding labor negotiations, and there is nothing specific to report out as part of the minutes. So with that, move to adjourn the meeting. And our next meeting will be April 12th at 2:00. And then after that, we go to the first Monday, the first Friday
Yeah, and I'm out of the country.
in May.
You said.
Oh, the April one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll talk about it. All right,
After that, we go to the first
first Friday. of the month.
Friday of the month.
Yeah. Okay. Good, thank you all.